Imagine walking into a bar just looking for a quiet drink. When three racist bikers decide to single you out. Now most people would have backed down or blown up in anger. But this man, a decorated soldier, he stunned the entire bar with what he did next. And trust me, you'll never forget it. Don't you dare sit there. Those words cut through the air like a knife. The voice came from the far end of the bar, harsh and heavy with anger. Heads turned instantly. The usual buzz of chatter, clinking glasses, and laughter dropped into silence, leaving only the low hum of an old jukebox in the corner. It was a small-town bar on the edge of a lonely highway. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone's name, where strangers stood out like neon signs in the dark. The floors were worn wood, sticky from years of spilled beer. The air smelled of smoke, fried food, and something else, tension. That night, a stranger walked in. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his muscles filling out a plain gray t-shirt. His jeans were simple, dusty from the road, and his boots carried the weight of someone who had walked far. But there was one thing that set him apart. One detail no one could ignore, the thin, metallic sound of army dog tags clinking softly against his chest with each step. His name was Jordan. Jordan was no ordinary man. He was a decorated black soldier, a veteran who had just returned home after serving overseas. He carried himself with quiet confidence, the kind of presence that made people notice without him trying. His eyes were sharp but calm, the eyes of someone who had seen too much yet refused to be broken. All Jordan wanted that evening was peace. A quiet night, maybe a cold drink to wash away the dust of the road and the heaviness of his thoughts. The war had taken much from him, brothers in arms, timepieces of himself, and here in this small town, he hoped to find just a moment of normalcy, but peace wasn't on the menu. As Jordan slid onto a stool at the counter, he felt it. Eyes on him. Hard, unfriendly stares. Three burly men in leather jackets leaned against a corner booth, their laughter dying the moment he entered. Their jackets bore skull patches, their heavy boots tapped against the floor, and their words carried the kind of venom only fueled by alcohol and hate. They were bikers. Loud, mean, and clearly looking for trouble. One of them smirked, his lip curled in mock disgust. "You lost, soldier boy? This ain't no place for you." His voice was a mixture of mockery and threat. The other two chuckled, nodding in agreement. Their eyes scanned Jordan like predators circling prey. The entire bar went still. A few customers looked down at their drinks, pretending not to notice. Others froze, caught between curiosity and fear, waiting to see what would happen next. Even the bartender, a middle-aged man with weary eyes, swallowed hard and shifted uneasily behind the counter. Jordan sat quietly, his hands resting on the bar, his expression unreadable. But inside he understood perfectly what was happening. He had seen this look before, different uniforms, different faces, but the same hate. This was a test. Would he shrink under their words? Would he leave quietly? Or would he stand his ground? Jordan's heart stayed steady. He wasn't about to back down. He picked up the glass of water the bartender had nervously set in front of him and took a slow sip. Every eye in the room followed the movement. Then he set the glass down gently, turned his head just enough to meet the biker's stares, and let a small, calm smile curl onto his lips. They wanted fear. They wanted anger. But Jordan gave them neither. He had faced rockets in the desert, bullets in the dead of night, and moments where every breath could have been his last. Compared to that, 3 drunk men in a bar didn't even register as danger. But still, he knew trouble was brewing. The air was thick with it. And soon everyone in that bar would realize this soldier was not the kind of man you wanted to mess with. Jordan calmly sipped his drink, the cool liquid sliding down his throat, but his eyes never left the reflection in the bar's mirror. He saw them, 3 bikers circling like vultures, their laughter fading into a low growl of hostility. He knew exactly what they wanted, a reaction, a rise, some show of weakness, but Jordan had been tested before. In deserts halfway around the world, in firefights where a second's hesitation meant death. He had learned to control the one thing these men clearly couldn't, their temper. The biggest of the 3, a mountain of a man with a thick beard and tattoos crawling up his arms, finally stepped forward. His boots thudded against the wooden floor as he closed the distance. With a heavy hand, he shoved Jordan's shoulder hard enough to rattle his glass. "You deaf or something?" the biker snarled, his breath stinking of cheap whiskey. "We don't drink with your kind." Gasps whispered through the room. A woman near the jukebox covered her mouth. The bartender froze mid-polish on a glass, his eyes darting nervously between them. Jordan turned his head slowly, his gaze locking on the man. His deep voice cut through the silence, calm but carrying weight. "I've faced worse than you overseas," he said steadily. "You don't scare me," the biker smirked, his lip twitching. "Oh yeah?" he mocked, stepping even closer. "Maybe we'll teach you some manners." One of the biker's friends scraped his chair back across the floor, the screech sharp as nails on glass. He rose to his feet, cracking his knuckles, a grin spreading across his face as if he could already taste the fight. The bartender, pale with worry, leaned in toward Jordan and whispered hoarsely, "Maybe you should leave, man. Don't make it worse." His voice trembled, but his concern was genuine. He had seen how these men operated, and it never ended well. But Jordan didn't move. He didn't flinch. His calm was so unshakable it unsettled the entire room. Inside, though, his blood burned. He thought about the battlefield, about nights when he fought side by side with men of every race, every background. In the trenches there was no color, only brotherhood, only survival. He thought about the flag he swore to protect, about the freedom these very men enjoyed because of sacrifices like his. And now, back home in the country he risked his life for, he was being disrespected in the simplest, ugliest way. The hypocrisy stung, but he didn't let it show. He remembered the discipline drilled into him. Never let anger control you. Never escalate when you don't need to. His drill sergeant's voice echoed in his head, the same voice that had kept him alive more than once. But the tension was unbearable now. The entire bar seemed to lean forward, breaths held, waiting for what came next. Would Jordan stand, fists flying, proving himself the way these bikers wanted? Or would he walk out, swallowing the insult, letting them claim victory? Every second stretched like an eternity. The jukebox skipped to silence as if even the music refused to play witness. A woman whispered, "Please don't," under her breath. An older man in the corner clenched his jaw, clearly disgusted at the display, but too afraid to intervene. Jordan sat there like a stone, unshaken, but his jaw tightened ever so slightly. His hand rested on the bar, fingers drumming once, twice, as if keeping time with his racing thoughts. The biker leaning over him mistook that calm for weakness. He sneered, towering just inches away from Jordan's face. "What's the matter, soldier boy? Don't have your little gun here to protect you?" The insult hung heavy in the air. Jordan's eyes lifted, locking onto the bikers with a cold, unflinching stare. There was no fear in them, only something else. Something that made even the toughest men pause. It was the look of a soldier who had seen the worst of humanity and lived to tell about it. The crowd leaned in closer, their hearts pounding, waiting for the explosion they knew was coming. Would this soldier fight back or walk away? Jordan rose slowly, the legs of his stool scraping against the wooden floor. The sound echoed like a warning bell through the silent bar. Now standing, he towered over the bikers, his broad frame and steady posture radiating quiet authority. He didn't ball his fists or puff his chest like they expected. Instead, he stood relaxed, calm, but with an energy that made the air heavy. His voice came low, steady, and razor-sharp. "You think you're tough because you gang up on one man? Where I come from, real men don't need to bully others to feel strong." The words landed like punches, but Jordan didn't raise his tone. He didn't need to. His calm carried more weight than any shout could. The bikers forced out laughter, but their eyes betrayed them. They weren't as confident as they pretended to be. The room noticed. Everyone noticed. Jordan reached into his pocket and pulled out his worn leather wallet. He opened it with slow, deliberate care, and from inside he placed something on the bar. Not cash, not an ID, a medal. The silver star caught the dim light, its shine impossible to ignore. Gasps rippled through the room. A woman near the bar covered her mouth. A man in the corner muttered, "My God, that's the real thing." Jordan's eyes never left the bikers as he spoke. "I earned this protecting the very freedom that lets you sit here and run your mouths. Men like me bled so you could drink in peace, and this is how you show respect." Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. The weight of his words hung heavy in the room. People shifted uncomfortably, guilt crawling into some of their expressions. One older man, his voice shaky with age but firm with conviction, muttered just loud enough to be heard, "He's right." The bikers didn't laugh this time. The leader narrowed his eyes. his jaw working like he was grinding glass between his teeth. The leader narrowed his eyes, his jaw working like he was grinding glass between his teeth. He stepped forward, trying to reclaim control. His shadow loomed across Jordan, but it didn't intimidate him. Medals don't mean nothing in here, the biker spat, his words dripping with venom. He leaned forward, his nose almost touching Jordan's. This is our bar, our rules, and I don't care what little shiny trinket you got overseas. For a moment, the whole bar seemed to hold its breath. The tension was electric, ready to snap. Jordan didn't blink. He didn't back away. Instead, he leaned forward slowly, his voice dropping to a whisper, but a whisper that carried like thunder through the silence. Touch me again, he said, each word deliberate. And I promise, you'll regret it. It wasn't a boast. It wasn't a threat made by a hot-headed man looking for a fight. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the calm certainty of someone who had lived through nightmares these bikers couldn't even imagine. The weight of it settled into the room. The bikers shifted uneasily. The leader's smirk faltered for just a fraction of a second. The crowd could see it, the first crack in their armor of arrogance. For the first time that night, it wasn't Jordan who looked outnumbered. It was the bikers. The bar patrons leaned in closer, hearts pounding, waiting for what would happen next. Would they test him? Would they ignore the warning? Or would they finally realize they weren't dealing with just another man? They were dealing with a soldier who had already faced death and refused to bow to fear. The next move would decide everything. One of the bikers finally snapped. His face twisted in rage, his pride shattered by Jordan's calm defiance. With a drunken roar, he lunged forward, swinging a wild punch aimed straight at Jordan's jaw. But Jordan was no ordinary man in a bar fight. He was a soldier, trained, disciplined, sharp as a blade even in the heat of chaos. In a split second, Jordan shifted his weight, sidestepping the blow with a precision that looked effortless. The biker's fist cut through empty air. Before anyone could even register what happened, Jordan's hand clamped down on the man's arm, twisting it with surgical accuracy. In one smooth, practiced motion, Jordan used the man's own momentum against him and flipped him over his shoulder. The biker's body slammed onto the wooden floor with a thundering crash. Glasses rattled on tables. The sound echoed through the bar like a gunshot. The man groaned in pain, clutching his side, completely stunned by the force and speed of the takedown. He wasn't just hurt, he was humiliated. The bar erupted in gasps. A woman screamed. An older man at the back muttered, "Holy hell," while others simply stared wide-eyed, their mouths hanging open. Nobody had expected this soldier to move like lightning. Jordan didn't even look angry. His expression remained calm, controlled, his breathing steady. To him, this wasn't a bar brawl. This was training. This was instinct. Years of discipline had turned him into something the bikers had never faced before. He straightened, his voice clear, carrying over the stunned silence. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his tone even, almost fatherly. "Walk away and this ends now." The two remaining bikers froze. For the first time that night, their bravado cracked. Their friend lay moaning on the floor, and standing above him was Jordan, unshaken, unafraid, his presence radiating quiet authority. The biggest of the two clenched his fists, his knuckles white. He took a step forward, his pride screaming at him to act, but then he stopped. His eyes locked with Jordan's, and in that instant he saw it. It wasn't anger in Jordan's gaze. It wasn't even hate. It was something far more unsettling. A calm, deadly certainty. The look of a man who had been to war, who had faced death and walked away. The kind of man who didn't bluff. Respect, or maybe fear, washed over the biker. His fists loosened. His shoulders dropped. He knew what the others didn't yet. Pushing this soldier any further would be a mistake they'd regret for the rest of their lives. "Not worth it," he muttered under his breath, his voice low, defeated. Slowly he bent down, helping his groaning friend off the floor. The third biker, who had been silent until now, quickly followed his lead. Together they backed away, their once dominant swagger now reduced to shame. Without another word, they dragged their injured companion toward the door. The heavy creak of it swinging shut marked their retreat. And then something unexpected happened. The crowd, which had been frozen in silence moments earlier, erupted into applause. Cheers echoed through the small bar, hands clapping, voices rising in support of the soldier who stood tall against hate. People who had been too afraid to intervene now felt safe enough to celebrate. They cheered not just because Jordan had won, but because he had done so with control, with dignity. He hadn't beaten the bikers with rage. He had beaten them with restraint. The bartender, still wide-eyed, broke into a grin as he poured another drink. He slid the glass toward Jordan and said with a shaky chuckle, "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen. On the house, soldier." Jordan nodded once, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He lifted the glass, not to boast, but in quiet acknowledgement. Around him, the bar buzzed with energy, people whispering, retelling what they'd just witnessed. They would carry the story long after that night ended. The story of the soldier who stood his ground, who didn't let hate break him, who showed strength without cruelty. And as Jordan took a slow sip, his calm returned. For him, it wasn't about the applause. It wasn't about proving himself. It was about something deeper, reminding people what true strength really looks like. Jordan sat back down, calm as ever, and took a slow sip of his drink. The glass clinked softly against the counter, but the bar itself felt different now, lighter, safer, as though a heavy storm cloud had finally lifted. Conversation slowly picked up again, though hushed at first, like everyone was still processing what they had witnessed. A young man, maybe in his 20s, walked over. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear anymore, but from the adrenaline of the moment. He looked at Jordan with wide eyes full of respect. "Thank you," the young man said quietly. "Not just for standing up for yourself, but for standing up for all of us. We were watching. We all felt it." Jordan turned toward him, his calm smile gentle but steady. "Sometimes," he said, "standing tall is the best fight you'll ever win." Those words struck the young man deeper than any punch or kick ever could. He nodded, almost in awe, before stepping back to join the others. Around the room, people kept sneaking glances at Jordan, whispering, pointing, yet none of it felt like gossip. It felt like reverence. The bikers never returned to that bar again. Word traveled quickly, as word always does in small towns. By morning, the story had spread like wildfire. The black soldier who stood his ground, who faced down hate without losing his composure, who silenced a gang of troublemakers with dignity and strength. But what lingered with people wasn't just the fight itself. It was how Jordan carried himself before, during, and after. He hadn't raised his fist to prove he was the toughest. He hadn't let anger dictate his actions. Instead, he let his training, his discipline, and his years of service speak louder than any insult, louder than hate itself. And that's what stunned everyone. Not just his strength, but his restraint. People expected violence. They expected the scene to end in chaos, broken bottles, maybe even blood. But Jordan showed them something different. He proved that real strength doesn't come from swinging hardest. It comes from knowing when not to swing at all. In a world where anger often meets anger, where hate is so often answered with more hate, Jordan carved a different path. He showed courage without cruelty, power without prejudice, discipline without destruction. The bar's regulars never forgot it. The young man who had thanked him that night told the story again and again, to friends, to family, even to his children years later. For him, and for many others, that moment became a reminder of what true respect really is. Respect isn't demanded by shouting. It isn't won by fear. It's earned, through integrity, through control, through the quiet courage to do what's right even when no one else will. And so, in that small bar on the edge of a lonely highway, a soldier gave the world a lesson it desperately needed. A lesson about honor, about dignity, about how the greatest battles aren't fought with fists or weapons, but with character. That night, Jordan's calm defiance didn't just silence hate. It inspired courage. It sparked respect. And it left behind a story that would never be forgotten. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful and inspiring stories. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.